So the to-do list application that I've been using to demonstrate React hooks is pretty simple. We did most of the work in a single component, but that's not how it works when you build a real application. You're going to have components all over the place, and you're going to want to have to pass your state to all of those components. And they might be several levels deep. They might be a child component that are way down there, and it's going to be annoying to try passing the props several components deep. So React has context that you can use to easily pass data several levels deep, or pretty much wherever you want to share data. So how can we use this with functions? They created a new hook called useContext, which we're going to try out in this video. So in this, what I did is I just kind of refactored the to-do list that I made. It uses the same logic, but now it's basically nested or is several components deep. So I have this index.js file here, and what I have here is my state. So I have my reducers, and then I have my to-dos that I would like to pass all the way down to my children in this dispatch function as well. So this to-do view is kind of blocking things. So all this guy does is he's a div and he renders form, to-dos, and reset button. So in my form over here, I'd like to be able to access dispatch. And in my to-dos over here, I'd like to be able to get the current to-dos value, be able to dispatch things. And then the reset button over here, I'd like to be able to dispatch things as well. So we're going to be adding context to this and using the new hook. So I'm going to start by creating a new context, which I'm going to call to-do context. And I'm going to import that from React. And we're going to say create context. And I'm going to export it now. So I'm going to say to-do context, and we're going to create a new one. And I'm just going to set the initial value equal to an empty object. I guess this doesn't really matter, since when we create the provider, which we're going to do in a second here, we're going to overwrite that. So in the index, we're going to create a provider. So here I'm going to say to do context dot provider, and that auto imported it at the top here. So I got that from to do context, which we just made. And now anything between the provider component here, so all this stuff and all the children below are going to be able to access this provider's data. So the data we want to provide is to-dos and dispatch. So now I can access this from those children components. So let's go ahead and start with the form. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to say use context, and this comes from React. And then I just pass in the context that I'd like to access. So in this case, to do context. And then I just destructure the values. So I can get to-dos and I can get dispatch. In this component, we're only using dispatch, so that's all I'm going to grab. We can do the same thing in our to-dos over here. So I'm going to say use context, and then I'm going to grab the to-dos as well. And I'm going to import this and import use context. And I can move this and do that in my reset button as well. And we'll use that. And again, we only use dispatch here, and we'll import these guys. All right, so now if we were to try this out, it's going to work the same. And let's see what we did wrong. We just need to reset it, I think. And we're going to get the same logic, but now we're able to pass them any level deep. So we can create some components here. We can cross them off. We can reset, and it all works the same. So that is how you use context with React hooks. You just say use context, and then you say the value you want to use. Now, something else I wanted to show is there's actually a new way in React 16.6 to use context. So we're going to turn this form component into a class component, because it's also good to note that you can use hooks. Well, you can't use hooks in classes, but you can use this stuff in both hooks, like we did here, or we used in our to-dos. We could also use a class component as well. So I'm going to create a new class component here. And I just need to rename this to JSX. And then, actually, I don't have my React peer component. So I have a nice little template that I have, but it's only for TypeScript files. So I'm just going to rename this to a TypeScript file. And now I have the template created. There we go. Now I'm going to go back to a JS file since we're just using JavaScript here. I just did that to get this boilerplate. So now I'm going to call this form. And I think I was doing export default. And I can put the same logic that I have up here basically. The only difference is the use input value. Now we need to convert that back to how you do forms in a class component. So I'm going to say state text is going to be a string here, and then I'm just going to say this dot state. Well, we're going to say value, and we can pass in the value of the state. And then on change, I'm not going to bother writing out an on change method. I'm just going to say this dot set state, and I'm going to say text is equal to, and we get the event on change e.target.value. And then the last part here is how do we grab the context in a class component. So before you'd actually have a consumer, but there's actually a new way that we can do this now. So in React 16.6, we can say static context type and set the context that we want to be able to access. And then we just say this.context. So let's go ahead and give that a try. I'll add that here. We'll add it to the top, and then I'm going to say my to-do context. And now I can say this.context and grab the dispatch. And I'm going to just get rid of all the code that we have up here since we're done using that. And I don't need to do import like that since we're just in JavaScript. And alright, so we have now basically converted this into a class component, and we're accessing the context like this, and then we do that. So let's see if this works. We're not using reset value. Oh yeah, reset value just said this.set, and we set it to an empty string. So that was just after we submit, we want to clear the value. And alright, so it's happy with us. Let's go check out that working. 1, 2, oh, we need to have a unique key. I wonder if we messed something up there. Are we getting a dispatch? Because we're not really doing anything different. I said text.value. We should just be passing text now. Alright, let's see. 1, 2, 3. That works, and everything else should work the same. Cool. So now this is an example of both using hooks and using class components. Well, I guess we're using functions and class components. And then also accessing the context from both a class component or accessing the context through a hook. So you can do both. And now I have my same application. I have both classes and I have forms, or not forms, but functions. And so this is what most applications are going to start to look like, is a mix of the two.